is behind this global sudden wave of thousands of pedophiles per country being caught, 10,000 plus arrests here, kids being caught in cages in California? You'll see it in the news one time and then nothing else after it. I mean, this is beyond the Twilight Zone. What is causing this massive move against pedophile rings that even MSM admits may bring down the Catholic Church?
A few weeks ago, I received a phone call by a professor, a very respected professor in economy at one of the most prestigious Italian universities, and his name is Antonio Maria Rinaldi. He called me and he said, Leo, something big is about to happen. They're really closing in on the pedophile network, and Donald J. Trump is really doing what he said he would do. So this is thanks to Donald J. Trump that we have this big change. But at the same time, you see, in the US, you have the possibility of at least saying your opinion, of stating your opinion thanks to InfoWars, while instead here in Europe, we are completely silent.
Leo Zagami. I remember Leo Zagami 10 years ago saying that Pope Francis, head of the Jesuits, would end up being the Pope. And they'd never had a Jesuit, much less a head of the Jesuits, as the Pope. I'm not a Catholic, but I knew that was, basically against the rules. And then I've read some of his books and writings long before it came out in the news that they were using sex operatives to basically compromise the Catholic Church and cause a takeover. And then sure enough, a few years ago when Ratzinger had to step down and was sent to Gandalf Castle, I'm not kidding, folks, that's the name of the castle he was sent to. That's not from Lord of the Rings. There it was in London Guardian that they'd use blackmail to get Francis in. But then when I traveled to Rome about a year and a half ago and met with Zagami there outside the Vatican, we also went inside, he said, listen, we're going to bring down this Pope. It's all coming out very, very soon. And just so much of what he said has turned out to be accurate. Again, when I first read his stuff 10 years ago, I thought this is just preposterous. And now, last week, Cardinal sex abuse charges raise questions about Pope's record. Reportedly, dozens and dozens of young boys raped and groomed over 40 years by his right-hand man, his confidant. So this is amazing. So I want to bring Leo Zagami up to talk about this and internally, because he lives right there in Rome. His family's been in government. He's been involved. There's a lot of amazing contacts. Living right there in Rome, talking to the Vatican police and more, predicting this would happen. What does this signify? What internal war does this show? Is this part of the larger movement? I know intelligence agencies, the good factions in Europe, here, you name it, have been saying they're going after the pedo rings, that Trump has signified and signaled this. Now we see bust in the UK. We see record bust here. We're seeing it in Italy. We're seeing it all over. Leo, you talked about this when I was in Rome. I guess it was about 2 years ago now. Time flies. You said, get ready. This is going to start happening. The good guys are going to strike back. And now it's happening, or is this part of something else?
No, it's happening, Alex. Hello, first of all, to you and your listeners and your viewers. Well, it's happening, and it's happening clearly in front of the whole world with George Pell, but it's also an internal conflict. A few days before George Pell got booted out of the Vatican, we had basically the police breaking inside the palace of the Holy Office, the ex-Inquisition, now known as the Congregation for the Matters of Faith, basically the headquarters of the most holy office in the Vatican. The police broke in and found a gay orgy, and they were using cocaine, and they basically had to arrest the secretary of a very prominent cardinal who himself was waging war against Cardinal Pell. So there is also an internal war here, and of course nobody wanted to show the face of this priest, but I wanted to show it to your viewers. It's called Monsignor Luigi Capozzi, and only very few media, I think only RT probably just mentioned the name of Capozzi's boss, this Cardinal Cocco Palmieri, who started this internal conflict because Cocco Palmieri and his secretary, who was found in this gay orgy, they are strong supporters of Pope Francis. So this is really becoming an incredible scandal. And once Cardinal Pell goes back in Australia, he's now, I think, already back in Australia, the actual scandal starts to unfold for the Anglo-Saxon media, because Cardinal Pell is responsible for many decades of a secret plan devised by the Vatican to give the less possible money to the victims of pedophilia and monopolize them.
That's right. Let's be clear. Cardinal Pell and, of course, Pope Francis have been involved quarterbacking the cover-up of the sex crimes, but because they were in charge of covering it up, that gave them the power to then blackmail the rest of the Vatican and put themselves into power. Was this a Jesuit operation from the beginning to bring in the pedophile rings, or who is the main driver of this? And give us who the different players are, Leo, because no one's laid out this intrigue like you have.
Well, Cardinal Pell was called in the Vatican at the end of 2013 to preside over a totally new office that will take care of the economy of the Vatican. You can understand that this must be probably the most important office in the whole of the Vatican.
This could be one of the most important offices in the world. We know the Vatican wealth is just incalculable.
And he was made a member of the C9 group, which is a group of 9 cardinals. And 3 of these cardinals have been heavily criticized for having protected in the past pedophilia, including Cardinal Pell. So many people were actually astonished of seeing in February 2014 Cardinal Pell arriving in Rome, and he didn't really hide in front of the media or in front of the other people in the Vatican. He started immediately acting with a lavish lifestyle that, of course, brought a lot of criticism towards Pope Francis, who wants to be this very conservative Pope who doesn't spend much money and is living in a modest surrounding. While instead, George Pell was spending money, was making all kinds of things happening that were putting really in bad light Pope Francis. But he was not taking care of any of this criticism. He put him there, and he basically became, after the Secretary of State, the number 3 in the Vatican. So this is the first time in history, Alex, that such a high-ranking officer, let's say, or minister of this Vatican is put in front of a trial. There is actually no deal between Australia and the Vatican, so Cardinal Pell could have stayed in the Vatican without being arrested. But in the end, I guess the situation forced him out, because there's also an internal war now within the Vatican. And this war involves both the economic side of the Vatican, the political side, and of course the sexual scandals with the drugs. Now, we know very well about this letter that was sent by 4 cardinals, including a friend and supporter of Steve Bannon, who is Cardinal Burke. Cardinal Burke and these other 4 cardinals ended up more and more isolated. And as you know, he was supervising the Knights of Malta as a spiritual advisor, but instead the Pope immediately sent him away in a remote island investigating some case of pedophilia, but just to get him out of Rome, because Cardinal Burke, for him, is like seeing Donald Trump. So, I mean...
so let me just stop you for a moment. Clearly, this is unraveling, and I know you have law enforcement sources because we were there. We met with some of them with you, obviously, when I came and visited with you. And you've been saying this is all coming. So explain to us, like we're 4 years old, because I know you live there, you're an expert, so you understand it, and you're a reporter that's been exposing this. Who are the players exactly? What does this massive fisher know? What does this tell us? Because clearly they're saying this is the highest level person ever to get indicted. They're saying it could be hundreds of children, grooming young boys, supplying them. I mean, how big is this? Was this an internal fight that busted him, or was this the liberty movement worldwide going after him? What's happening?
This is a worldwide thing, Alex, and I can prove it for your viewers today, because the first person Cardinal Pell brought in Rome with him was Lord Christopher Patten. And Lord Christopher Patten was responsible for defending the BBC pedophilia rings between 2011 and 2014, when he was in charge of the trust of the BBC. So, Christopher Patten, who defends the pedophiles in England, arrives with George Pell in Rome.
Stay there. We got to go to break. Vatican expert Leo Zagami, whose books that I've read, 3 of them now, read like he was in a time machine of the future. He'll be with us on the other side. Again, this is incredible. Stay with us, ladies and gentlemen. I got to tell you, I've been reading Leo Zagami's work for, I guess, more than a decade now. I've read 3 of his books. I've met him, spent days with him in Rome. And by then, I knew he was for real. But I got to tell you, I mean, everything he wrote about and talked about is like coming true like magic. In fact, the cover of one of his books is lightning striking the Vatican. We go out there one night to videotape live, and lightning strikes it the same way it did on the cover of his book. And he goes, it's crazy. I mean, it's just everything about this very eerie. Rome's very magic. Also very, very weird vibe. But now it's all coming out. Look at these headlines. The pedophile blind cardinal who could bring down Pope Francis. And this is out of the Daily Beast last year, 3/3/16. So more than a year ago. And everything he's talking about, the cover-up scandals and payoffs of Lord Patton's reign, that's the Telegraph, covering up the pedophiles there. Mainline news in England says pedophiles run the country. I mean, we're talking about killing kids, you name it. It's all coming out. It is literally a satanic network. And then you know why they're so against Trump. Now, the New York Times, the Washington Post, they all just say, oh, sex assault, Pope's right-hand man investigation. No, it's kidnapping, raping, procuring children. They don't even put it in the headlines what it is. So the whole liberal globalist media is defending this right-hand man of the Pope, number 3 in the Catholic Church. It is unbelievable. Leo Zagami, let me ask you. We know the forces at the Vatican, who they are. We'll talk about that in a moment. Leo Zagami, let me ask you this question. Who is behind this global sudden wave of thousands of pedophiles per country being caught, 10,000 plus arrests here, kids being caught in cages in California? You'll see it in the news one time and then nothing else after it. I mean, this is beyond the Twilight Zone. What is causing this massive move against pedophile rings that even MSM admits may bring down the Catholic Church?
A few weeks ago, I received a phone call by a professor, a very respected professor in economy at one of the most prestigious Italian universities, and his name is Antonio Maria Rinaldi. He called me and he said, Leo, something big is about to happen. They're really closing in on the pedophile network, and Donald J. Trump is really doing what he said he would do. So this is thanks to Donald J. Trump that we have this big change. But at the same time, you see, in the US, you have the possibility of at least saying your opinion, of stating your opinion thanks to InfoWars, while instead here in Europe, we are completely silenced. So it's very difficult to put through all these truths that are coming out because we are censored left, right, and center. The liberal media dominate completely.
That's right. I should add, you've even been detained, arrested before. That's been in the news. You're a big figure in Italy and in Rome. For those that don't know, you don't brag about, but you've had family that were national senators. Remember, Trump in 2012 tweeted, got to do something about these missing children grabbed by perverts. Too many incidents, fast trial, death penalty. The word from high-level Trump supporters and his security people.
It's even worse than before because they're using all these kids arriving with the refugees. They are taking them from the boats directly and bringing them in their pedophile networks, taking their organs. They found hundreds of emptied bodies put back together in Egypt and in other places before. This is scandalous. I think this is really becoming revolting. And the double standards of the liberal media make it impossible to have some clarity.
But Leo, we'll have the next segment to give you the floor because you're the expert. But we have high-level Clinton operatives convicted shipping in kids. kids disappearing, the UN mass raping children. How big is this empire of pedophiles? And from my research, that's just the gateway drug. After that, it's literal Satanism, human sacrifice, devil worship. Describe to us from your deep research how deep the rabbit hole goes.
Well, first of all, we have a president of one of the most important countries in the world, France, who was himself a victim of pedophilia. Macron is shown in an image which is he's 15 years old, and behind him the future wife and the ex-husband of the future wife. And this should make you think about how they are really making this a normality. A president of a country as powerful as France that has nuclear weapons and so on is in the hands of a guy who looks down on Trump. And, you know,
notice none of the EU leaders, none of the world leaders now have children. Only Trump has children.
Yeah, because they destroyed the family image, the family tradition. That's what they're trying to do. I mean, they have...
Look at Italy. Italy used to be totally family, has the lowest birth rate in Europe.
Well, absolutely. Lowest birth rate in Europe, and the politicians say, well, we need the immigrants to fill this gap. We need to let the refugees in. Alex, the situation is getting worse day by day.
We're going to talk about how the Vatican is working with radical Islam as well. The Pope said he's disgusted by Europe's Christian roots. More with Leo Zagami. Tell everybody tune in, folks. This is the inside intel. This is the inside intel. LeoZagami.com. You're listening to it. The most hated transmission in the world, if you're a globalist. Yeah, they're not going to be able to keep us in the dark for life. Not going to be able to hide us from the waiting world. Nico Costa, our great producers in there, going over these articles. The pedophile blind cardinal who could bring down the Pope. This is a year ago, where he's interrogated by the police for 4 hours and says, yeah, I knew they were raping the kids. Kids liked it. That's what Leo Zagami was just talking about a few minutes ago. This is so crazy, and he's breaking down how arrogant they are, and then they meet with the top pedophile cover-up artist of England. This is a system of political control. What did they do last week when I'm covering this? They make up a lie that I say there's a Martian slave colony of children. I didn't say that. I said I disagree with that. That's the headline. They had a NASA press conference to say, I'm crazy. Why don't they just say that Uranistan, that the Muslims really come from Uranistan? That's a joke. Or Pollutistan. I mean, it's amazing, folks. They are literally desperate. Every time I talk about what's happening to kids, and they busted the #2 guy to the Pope, his right-hand man, #3 in the Vatican, admitting he knew kids were being raped. Now it turns out they've got dozens and dozens and dozens saying he raped them brutally. And you've got interviews with him saying, oh, they liked it. So arrogant, believing he'd never get busted. Pell responded, no, I didn't. People had a different attitude then. There was no specifics about the activity, how serious it was, and the boy wasn't asking me to do anything about it, just lamenting and mentioning it. This is what the police say, lamenting the sexual abuse. And again, they hide it in plain view, and now because of Pizzagate that they totally diverted off and made the whole controversy, and they lie and say that I created it, or that I'm saying no pedophilia exists in the world. It's all their giant deception, and it's coming down. It doesn't matter what they do. It's all coming out, so get ready. And even if they kill Trump or me or Leo Zagami, the truth's coming out. You can see it, you can feel it. There's no putting the genie back in the bottle. We're going back to Leo Zagami of LeoZagami.com if you want to read the unfiltered information. We'll put his URL up on screen as well. Leo, like the lion, Leo Zagami, ZAGAMI.com. Amazing information. And again, just a week ago, Pope Francis was defending this guy. Now he's removed him. So what's going to happen next in the Vatican? We'll get into the Islamic alliance with the Vatican now. Let me go back to Leo Zagami of the powerful website, LeoZagami.com. I've been ranting here, and you tend to get into details and kind of inside baseball, living there in Rome for your whole life. But just recap for folks that just joined us. about Cardinal Pell, about all the arrogance, about what this signifies, how the certain arms of the Jesuits took over, who Francis is, and what this signifies in the bombshell from your high-level sources that indeed Trump has put the impetus and I guess the courage people need, because I've got federal marshals and FBI agents, Navy SEALs who are also federal officers, like the Saw Man coming on, Craig Sawyer, who have the contacts in all over the world in intelligence agencies, and they say it's killing kids, raping kids, murdering kids. They're finding the dead kids, and then it's not, they'll find the dead kids, or they'll find them in cages in Florida or Texas or Louisiana or New York or California, and then it's never in the news again. Hundreds of arrests. It'll be in KTLA, including kids in captivity, in cages, being raped, and then it's never in the news again. Just imagine the power of those stories being shut down, but Trump moving against it. No wonder they're so threatened by him. So for the next 7, 8, 9 minutes, Mr. Zagami, you've got the floor to lay all this out.
Well, let's say, first of all, that all this mass of immigrants, of refugees arriving into Europe are perfect for the pedophilia elite to just take all the kids. In the last few days, a lot of people have pointed out how these children literally disappear once they're off the coast of Libya, because, as I said before, they're used for the organs, but also they're used for their blood, because their blood is young blood, gets taken and gets used by the elite that wants always rejuvenating blood and wants to stay younger the longer possible. At the same time, we have a church, the church of today, that is possible will literally go bankrupt if they had to pay all the cases of pedophilia that are fronting them. I mean, once we will see Cardinal Pell in Australia under the lights of the media worldwide, we will see how this crisis is going to really touch the Vatican even more than now. And at the same time, I mean, when you have the palace of the ex-Inquisition, which is raided by the police while they're having a gay orgy with cocaine, and then 2 days ago, the head of the Holy Office of the Congress of the Matters of Hate was forced himself to resign by the Pope, this guy called Gerhard Ludwig Müller. And he was forced to resign because, of course, they're saying that he's probably the guy who tipped the police to go there while they were having this gay orgy in the building where he has his offices. So I mean, Pope Francis is protecting these pedophiles. He's protecting these pedophiles, and this is becoming more evident each day. And at the same time, he's teaming up with Soros. So with George Soros, that of course wants to flood the whole of Europe with these immigrants. We have a situation which is completely out of control now. The ports of Italy, the Interior Minister has asked and demanded Europe if we can close down the ports of Italy because we are flooded by these immigrants, but we can't do anything because, of course, this new world order wants them in, and we are forced to just let them in. But once they are in, especially the young children, they are the first ones to disappear because all this is interconnected. And at the same time, as I said, we have this crisis, the biggest crisis to face the Vatican, an economical crisis that will bring down the Vatican, because if they really had to give the money to each of these pedophilia victims, not the money that Cardinal Pell had devised in his Ponzi scheme, where the maximum he will give was around $30,000 to a poor victim of pedophilia, and plus he will keep a grip on each victim and manipulate them. This is what came out of the investigation.
And there's nothing more secretive than the Vatican, its own state, its own country, its own system for over 1900 years. Could this bring down the Vatican as we know it? Because we know the Vatican's already been overtaken by globalists, by Luciferians, by this global cult of pedophiles. Could this actually bring it down and cause a reform?
Well, 2 weeks ago, when Libero Milone, who is the revisor of the accounts of the Vatican, gave up his job, and he was the guy immediately under Cardinal Pell doing all the accountings for the whole thing, Well, then people started to be a little bit worried about the situation, because there is something that is completely going wrong here in the Rome and in the Vatican. And as I said, if they really had to compensate all the victims of this church will have to close for bankruptcy. So at one point we will have to face this situation. Donald J. Trump is a great president, and he has had the strength to go to the Vatican, and he himself, he was dignified, with a family next to him, with the strength of a nation that believes in certain values. And look how he was treated. I mean, Pope Francis was obviously embarrassed by his position and his role, because he is supporting George Soros all the way. This is what's happening, unfortunately.
I saw headlines everywhere that Trump's going to be humiliated. He's at the G20 this week because he's the only one against the global carbon tax, the so-called climate deal. No, Putin's against it as well. And the whole thing's a fraud. And these other countries don't have to make the cuts. Only Western Europe, only the United States.
That Pope Francis intervened with a whole encyclica, a whole book on this whole thing about the environment, about the carbon taxes, about the way we should treat the planet. So Pope Francis is the one who is manipulating this new world order and is dominating it together with other people like George Soros. These are the enemies of humanity at the moment. It's becoming more and more evident for everybody, I mean, for your viewers. Once these scandals will start unleashing more and more in the public arena, then the censorship will, of course, go into place. Because, yes, we are saying...
I was about to say, how can they deal with the magnitude of this coming out? I mean, I guess just not reported. This has hardly gotten any coverage. The right-hand man of the Pope covering up decades of child rape, procuring of children. I mean, this is incredible.
Well, they are absolutely covering up the fact there was a raid into a gay orgy, the fact that this whole thing is linked to an internal battle between within the gay lobby of the Vatican. And of course, we have gay male prostitutes going in every day inside the Vatican, and cars with the Vatican number plate being used to traffic cocaine. I mean, what kind of church is this, Alex, that can look down on people and say, you are a sinner, you are not a sinner? I mean, this is a church which is in complete disarray. I have published a book recently which is called Confessions of an Illuminati, Volume 3, Espionage, Tempers, and Satanism in the Shadow of the Vatican, which actually shows also what happened to a poor girl which disappeared at the beginning of the 80s and were never seen again, called Emanuele Orlandi. I've interviewed the brother a couple of times. And now, 3 weeks ago, the Vatican said they have a dossier, basically they have a whole file full of with the investigation on this Emanuele Orlandi.
And let's be clear, Leo Zagami, I mean, obviously growing up there, having family in government, you got into the Freemasons, and then, of course, what you call classical Illuminati. And for folks that don't know, there's different branches of that, just as different branches of more modern Masons the last 250 years or so. And then George Washington wrote about the different fights within the Illuminati. But maybe you should come back and briefly speak to that, because now you're not part of any of that. You're not in the Masons, you're not in the Illuminati, you're not part of the Vatican, any of that.
Well, I'm part of my own organization which is trying to fight all this. We are a Christian order. We are a Christian order that believes in Christian values. We operate within Freemasonry trying to promote these Christian values and criticizing all this corrupt Masonic world and this corrupt system made of secret societies that simply are sects of the New World Order that brainwash people.
Well, let's explain how these things interconnect and tie together in a final segment with Leo Zagami. What else should people be aware of? Can we drill into the Islamic connection? For those that don't know, the Pope has been quoted in major papers, as you know, in Italy, saying, I get nauseous when I hear about Europe's Christian roots. We need to bring in Islam. It's the future. While he lives behind walls, he is so flagrant trying to break people's will, isn't he? Leo, we've lost your audio. We're going to get that boosted here in just a moment and find out what's happening and maybe see if that comes back. Leo, can you hear me now? Go ahead.
Yes, as I said, the Jesuits have been in league with Islam for a long time. They've been secretly collaborating even with ISIS. There is even a priest that is said to be kidnapped, a Jesuit priest in Syria, who is actually working and recruiting with ISIS and the Islamic State. So the Jesuits have also collaborated with Fethullah Gulen, who tried to activate this coup that failed in Turkey. And we saw also the results of all that. So, I mean, it's obvious that the Jesuits are actually secretly in the closet Muslims. And I have verified this myself personally when 10 years ago I was involved with the Muslim faith. And at one point, through the door came the secretary of the Interreligious Affairs of the Jesuits, Thomas Michel, and he presented himself.
No, I remember you 10 years ago and you were in the Netherlands or whatever it was. That was what I thought was crazy.
Yeah.
And let's just say it, Leo, you've got an intelligence agency cutout. I mean, you're involved in Islam, you're involved in all the P2 lodges, you're involved with the Jesuits. I mean, who are you really working for? Because you're telling the truth. Just tell us who you work for.
Well, this is a long tradition. It goes back hundreds of years. You just have to, maybe one day I will show you the pedigree of my family, made of many kings, of many queens, of many aristocrats who protected the Christianity of Europe. So I am actually...
No, I understand. Stay right there. So you're saying you're a Rosicrucian then. We'll be back in 70 seconds. Stay with us. So the Pope's right-hand man admits to covering up massive pedophilia and is now indicted in Australia for it. Leo Zagami is who he says he is. He's been involved in all these high-level things. And the stuff he's written about for 10 years has all come true, pretty much like he said it would. So he's a lot of credibility. In my book, The Proof's in the Pudding. Then I was asking, in all this subterfuge, who's he thinks behind Trump? Who's behind him? Why do we see folks moving against the pedophile networks, finally? And he says he represents a secret Christian order. So let's get into all this briefly. Leo Zagami, who are the players from your research?
From my research and from my own direct experience, there is a whole part of Freemasonry which is actually Christian and is siding with Donald J. Trump. It's the same part also of people we find also in the Knights of Malta. They also sided with Donald J. Trump until the Pope got furious and in fact created an inspection, special inspection presided over the Knights of Malta because he saw that they were rebelling against his liberal diktat. One thing I wanted to say before we terminate today is you are very kind to have me on this show, but I wanted to make clear one thing. A couple of years ago, I said that the Pope will resign when he will be in Argentina next. Now, the Pope, and you can check this for yourself, there is a list of pastoral visits that you can find on Wikipedia, changed 4 times, he canceled 4 times his visit to Argentina. So, it's possible that the Pope will resign next year when he goes to Argentina, but he wants to resign only when he goes to Argentina. There is a link with him resigning in Argentina because he wants to retire like an old pensioner and going back to his native Argentina. This is what he wants to do. In the meantime, of course, he's acting his job as Pope, as Jesuit Pope, meaning a Pope which has taken away the legitimate Pope, which is Pope Ratzinger. Pope Ratzinger is to all effects still the legitimate Pope, but he's been casted out by the Jesuit system, blackmailed out by the Jesuit system, who has placed this Pope Francis because Pope Francis is a part of this big charade with George Soros, with this whole Rothschild banking system that has placed also Macron. Macron is a big player here in Europe of this new world order and is a big player together with the Vatican.
Have you seen how crazed Macron is when he's around Trump trying to crush his hand and bugging his eyes out?
This is a document that shows basically that Macron, when he used to be Minister of Economy in France, he was lecturing in regards to mondialization, the synonym of progress, in the headquarters of the Grand Orient of France. The Grand Orient of France represents the atheist Freemasons. The ones who gave birth to communism, who promoted communism, basically, because communism was created in...
Yeah, they launched the Jacobin movement and the French Revolution.
Of course, after that, but the Grand Orient of France after 1877 is the only obedience that accepts people who are also atheists in their lodges. So you see, it's not too good to generalize all Freemasons as the same. Unfortunately, most Freemasons today are part of this mondialization scheme. They are.
I understand. George Washington wrote about the modernization, kicking Christianity out, bringing Luciferianism, the occult. Those are in his letters. Anybody can read them online.
Well, the big problem is, of course, that there is a Christian root to Freemasonry. This year we celebrate 300 years. 2017 celebrates the 300 years of speculative Freemasonry, the moment in which the first Grand Lodge constituted in England. And we can say that actually the roots of Freemasonry were Christian. But after 1813, at that point, they decided to let the Muslims in. And gradually, of course, they let also everybody else in, but the Muslims took over Freemasonry, and that is one of the subjects that actually in my latest book.
Well, I know, you used to talk about how powerful the Muslims were, and I didn't believe it, but behind the scenes, they run the Federal Reserve, you name it, they're really coming after us. Leo Zagami, always intriguing. People can find your books on your website. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me on, and God bless America on the 4th of July.
Thank you.